So I did send an agenda around on Sunday, hopefully you all got it. It's essentially just what was left over from the last meeting. There were several issues that we didn't have time to cover, and we'll do those tonight. And then I'll talk about a few other things and talk about processes. Again, we covered most, the first, let's see, 3, 4, 5, 6 issues, and there are 5 remaining that we really didn't get into last time. And one of these we probably won't cover again tonight, the solar ordinance, because neither Henry nor Peter is here tonight, but we did hear from Henry last time. That he wasn't recommending any specific changes to the solar ordinance itself.
Just for,
Residential.
small,
Yeah.
non-roof units.
Yeah.
And
then,
Peter had proposed that language.
yeah, Peter had several CID things, and that's actually one of the issues I put on the list for Kristen, is that the rural character issue. I don't know if you're familiar. So anyway, we'll set that one aside and then talk about it again when Henry and Peter are here. So why don't we start with the communication tower ordinance? So this Jack and Brandon.
So I sent it around. Peter was there when he responded, and he had a lot of sort of grammatical changes, clarification changes, nothing substantive. So nothing's really changed. The only sort of substantive change that I made was federal government changed the law on telecommunication towers and wanted to make sure that towns couldn't prohibit them or drag out the process so long. So they put some time limits that towns have to process an application once it's determined complete. So I added that in and I accepted all of Peter's edits. Peter had a lot of edits.
Did he have edits to your language or the language that's there? Both.
And the one that I didn't do was he proposed some reorganization of sections, which I haven't taken a look at really.
Yeah.
But we've only, I guess we've only used this once, this communication tower ordinance.
Of the elements.
We should go
Yeah,
with this.
yeah.
But
Can I ask a question?
Yeah.
Okay. Have we considered putting anything new in here in terms of, and there'll be, I believe, in the next 2 to 3 years, a lot of them, mini towers, which will be put out to spread 5G in towns like us, where there's a lot of valleys and so forth. These mini towers will be put up on telephone poles and so forth to serve.
yeah, I heard
Those-
about that.
Yeah, because 5G basically can replace any cable or fiber at this point. Most towns are doing this, and so I don't know if there's anything
Does it
we're worried
replace cell
about.
towers?
What's that?
Does it replace cell towers?
It can, yes. They're like repeaters, but the cell towers, like Elvin's, is high enough, so, they can, you go over to South Road, I know, Stanley Road, they get the, 5G and they're using these 5G devices. But down where I live on Torrey, over Moranica, like that, they're gonna be rolling these out, and I just want us to be aware of it, think if there's anything that we might want to be.
So does it not meet would it not meet the existing definition of telecommunications?
That's what I'm asking you, because again, this wouldn't be a 30, 50, 100-foot tower. This would be, put it on a telephone pole at that height.
So the current ordinance says all facilities less than 50 feet in height are exempt from planning board review.
Then that's what we can go with, and realize that that's gonna be coming.
Right. So there are short towers that are mounted on telephone poles.
Right.
those.
For example, over Maranacook, they might have it at a high point over there. Say someplace like, the Weather Vane area, on Torrey, they might have it on top of Kent's Hill because it would be going down into the valley. Again, it's like a repeater, if you know what repeaters are with, cable. Just to expand the footprint of 5G.
They're gonna go on CMP poles, or you're gonna set them?
The CMP poles, hold the fiber, cable and everything, so
Yeah.
that's for them to decide.
I can't remember where we drew that 50 feet from. But I'm sure there was a reason for it, but I don't know what it is.
But is there an objection to those?
It's something to consider. I mean, if somebody thought of something, but
I'll look around and see whether towns have passed ordinances for what reasons.
Are there any of them up already?
not in Readfield.
Not really.
I'm looking them up, they're called small cells,
Yeah,
they go on light poles, buildings, utility poles.
That's all of
Is
it.
that just that white antenna you see once in a while?
No, you see,
Or that, it's not.
I'm not sure. I just know that it's gonna happen, with especially AT&T who's behind on things. That they can, expand their 5G. Have a hell of a marketing thing, so you don't have to worry about trees falling down.
it says they're 12 to 24 inches tall, 6 to 12 inches wide, and weigh 10 to 40 pounds. They have to be placed 10 to 50 feet. They're like boosters, right?
Right.
Yeah.
So we would need to know what you're So, how's that? You changed the setback, yeah, everything under 50 feet, so will they fall into that? How's that gonna work? Because they're gonna be right on the side of the road and they're already not in any setback. Or are they just exempt because they're part of the cable system?
Setback,
So the setback for telecommunications tower?
Yeah, he wanted to change, so even the under 50 foot had to meet the same setback requirement.
not as big towers.
Right, but you still wanted to have the setback requirement. Am I confused? I'm probably confused.
I think that the setback for the small towers was 1.5 times their height,
So these are towers.
so that they didn't fall on.
Well, towers are currently, standing phone poles.
So these are basically, they'll be exempt.
These-
Yeah, if we leave it that way, really, it'll be fine.
They really don't qualify as towers.
Well, there's a definition of what the tower is. And it's pretty broad. It says any structure, whether freestanding or in association with a building or other permanent structure that is designed and constructed primarily for the purpose of supporting one or more antennas, including, et cetera. The term includes radio and television transmission towers, microwave towers, common carrier towers, cellular phone, alternative tower structures, and similar structures. So it kind of sweeps in.
But you've
all
got
that stuff.
your smart meters, you have the little antennas every so often, so those are gonna be basically the same thing, right?
But the way I don't know about the setback thing, but in general, it wouldn't apply if the tower is less than 50 feet. But
But I think Brendan's also saying
Like,
they're less than.
I'm writing a
50
note
feet,
right now,
so
coming out
setback,
tomorrow.
That's what you.
Unless we exempted them.
I've got some information on what I'm down to, this is pretty interesting, I want to just read it off real quick.
Sure.
Okay. Why towns should regulate 5G small cells, aesthetics and zoning control, small cells are often installed on existing infrastructure, light poles, utility poles, traffic signals, but without regulations, they could clutter streets, obstruct views, or impact historic districts. Ordinances can set design standards such as requiring camouflaging, color matching, or setbacks for residential properties. Public safety and health considerations Well, the FCC and WHO state that 5G is within the safe limits. Some residents express concerns about radio frequency exposure. Towns can regulate setback distances from homes, schools, and hospitals. Their outright bans are usually preempted by federal law. Municipal authority, 5G cells require a public right of way, meaning that they may be placed in front of homes or businesses. Towns can regulate where they can be placed, height restrictions and pole sharing requirements. Preservation of property values, unregulated deployment can lead to excessive installations, potentially affecting property aesthetic values. Ordinances can ensure co-location, multiple carriers on the same pole instead of multiple small per block. And just about down here, local governments should control permits, application fees, and annual fees for ROW use. Some states limit how much towns can charge. The FCC caps small cell permit fees at $270 per site. So here's what you can regulate: aesthetic standards, placement restrictions, permitting fees, pole sharing and co-location, installation and maintenance rules. You can't ban them, you can't regulate signal strength, and you can't place health-based restrictions. The FCC regulates the acquisition. So we could create an ordinance so they don't stack up in front of places, and we could require them to blend in, and it might not be a bad idea to get ahead of it before they explode and end up everywhere.
Makes sense. I don't know, I don't know if this ordinance is. It's that, you know, could be amended to include that. Take a look at.
I'll send you this language. I'll send it to everybody.
Seems. So, I mean, it's not exactly the same thing, but it seems similar enough that that might be the right place for it. If we were to do so.
So, in the exemption, the 50-foot thing was mostly for residential. So there's commercial use of twisting structures, poles. But
But if you're putting on telephone poles that are already out by the street, you can't. There's no way to not
to me, it's
violate a setback.
right. And
So,
how tall are they?
1 to 2 feet.
Yeah, so they're not gonna fall on anything.
right. I mean, really, I don't think you're gonna notice it there.
Oh,
What?
the unit itself is 1 to 2 feet high, but it's at the top of
It's at
the
the
pole.
top of the pole.
But if it's at a pole, it's already there.
Yeah.
I mean, is this something where they're gonna put 50 in down, or what do you?
Again, what I foresee would be in a town where it's worthwhile, like Readfield. So we got the fitting so quickly that the next company that is going to really push this, and the two are T-Mobile right now and Verizon. You're going to be seeing these; they're just going to happen quickly. And if, like we did with solar, I mean, we didn't do anything. You really got hammered. This could be something we could get hammered with. You might want to put this off to the next meeting, but I think it's something worth thinking about.
We can't regulate practically setbacks.
Placement. You can only have so many so far from each other, so far from the house.
I mean, to avoid having like 10 on.
Right.
Oh,
So they have to share them like the cell towers. God bless you.
I've got examples of what other towns have done too, so I'll send it to you as well. I can imagine they're a lot cheaper than putting a tower up there, because you're not paying rent, unless you're probably paying a small amount of rent to that.
They're probably not paying anything, and plus it's the advantage of not having trees come down on the wire.
Sure, they pay the same either.
Yeah, and plus we've got all this dead space between Augusta and Livermore Falls, so
Right.
probably be a good thing. I mean, for residents, we probably want them,
Absolutely.
but they need to be placed responsibly.
Exactly.
Just.
I think it's one of the things after that,
Maybe.
So can't regulate, I mean, the height's not an issue really. And setbacks isn't really an issue. It's mainly a visual thing of clustering them.
Yeah.
Because it makes it.
And setting some standards for what they might look like, you know, they can't be bright purple.
Okay,
I think I just gave some good information. I don't, might not be that difficult to draft up.
right, I can see if I can fit it in here.
Sorry to take up the band.
That's a good call. You know, do it now before you get 100 of them down, right? Good well.
Okay, so, anything else about the changes, Jack, or anybody else, any comments on Jack's?
If there was, we're gonna eventually, I would see the town meeting a second tower. The way things have changed in technology. So if the second tower is going on the same property, will they have to go through the whole process?
And they wouldn't be co-located on the same tower,
Well, if the same tower gets filled.
or they want to go to another tower.
Right.
Yeah, they have to go through.
It wouldn't make sense because the towers can co-locate a lot of different carriers as they do right now.
Yeah.
If anything like that happened, it'd probably be at a different location, high standard location.
Paula? Can I ask Jack a question?
Yes, go ahead, John.
Jack, I was looking at the changes that Peter wanted to make,
Yeah,
and in Article 8, in, I guess it's paragraph A, he wanted to take out the second sentence. You know why he wanted to do that? The one that starts unless otherwise exempt or unless a waiver is obtained. I think I got that right, that he wanted to take that out.
I don't have my red line version here, so it's 8A.
Yeah, Article 8, paragraph A. And there was a second sentence, starts unless otherwise exempt. And I thought that I read what Peter was saying, that he wanted to take that out. I just was curious. I didn't know why.
Take a look at it.
Yeah, Peter sent several.
It might be an issue of redundancy, because the first sentence says in the rural and CID, facility above the threshold height shall be permitted when it conforms. And then that second sentence, it says it shall not be permitted in any zone except rural and CID. So he may be looking at that as redundancy. Would be my guess.
Yeah, it could be.
I'm not sure.
We can ask Peter that question, John.
Thanks.
Okay, what else? Did you have anything else, John?
I'm sorry, no, that was it.
Anybody? Okay, I already talked about the solar ordinance. We'll get back to that with Henry and Peter. One of the items on the list for review is a floodplain management ordinance, and did you have a chance to look at that?
I did indeed. floodplain management ordinance we have now, it's from back in 2011. It's fairly simple, it just requires a application. If they're in the floodplain, I printed out a couple of maps. Floodplains pretty much follow the edges of the lake, or wetlands that come off of it, like the tar property. The only thing that's really new is that there's new maps coming out, they're out, but they're not posted yet, and that happens, then I guess I'm responsible to get it out to everybody.
Didn't they just do something like, was it a year or two ago?
About a year ago, because we downloaded them, and I don't know where they went to download. Right now, I just went to the FEMA site and downloaded a couple of the ones that we have.
Okay, so those are the ones you're talking about.
These are the present ones that are on the FEMA site. They have a placeholder for the new ones in our CAI software, but it's not injected yet. As I read it, when I looked at some of the new ones, the zone has been shrunken, probably because there haven't been a lot of flood events in Readfield. But again, my interest was piqued by looking at a lot of these lakes, and a lot of these lakes, the flood zone is either non-existent or is over the 100-foot setback. And so it takes some looking at when we're doing some of these, like for example, the one over on Horsey, they're outside of it because it's a very thin overlay. So I've got a few of the maps if you want to look at it. The application is fairly straightforward. It's supposed to be managed through the code officer. He probably won't do it, he doesn't care. But as far as I'm concerned, I think the flood management ordinance that we have is sufficient. And
So it's
should
just an issue of getting the maps.
maps, right?
So who is supposed to be uploading maps?
I guess we gotta talk to Eric. We've had a few issues with the new CAI software.
Yeah.
But there is a placeholder when you look at it, if you click on it, and there's a lot of new things on there, pretty nice. Another thing for you all to know is because that's gonna be going online, so if you ever wanna look at the CAI maps, it'll be online with all the different things. They did not, the one thing that we wanted to do the most, if you remember back to Fournier, I was mistaken. They show on the online maps, the setback for Main Street as huge on one side of the road, not on the other, because the overlay was wrong. They didn't fix that. They're gonna fix that, but these are things that we're trying to pick up as we go along. But that's gonna be a very good tool for everybody at home, because it'll have all this flood, everything that we can do here. It's a really great tool. It'll be available soon. Supposed to have a training meeting.
Yeah.
You don't get snowed out, yeah. So again, just bottom line on the flood hazard, it's been there since 2011, it seems to be working. Suffice, so I didn't change anything right
now. This next one, the definitions of seasonal and year-round dwellings, that was an issue that Chip raised as well. I've got some thoughts on that, but why don't you
Okay.
describe to everybody what you're thinking on that?
Well, one change, I'm gonna hand these out to everybody. This is the ordinance. Interesting thing is that we have, you'll remember back to the, it was over in Marana.
It was Fortini, wasn't it?
14, yes. We kind of, as a board, pushed that to, because they had done so many upgrades and everything, to apply for year-round. And I think I pushed back a little bit, and something you might want to think about is all these things on seasonal conversion refer to, it's a problem, because a lot of these campgrounds, temporary houses and everything, they're there, they're not doing a lot, but if we push or encourage the year-round conversions, that's gonna promote a lot of pollution, off-site development, more crowding and everything. So I think, we're not gonna put it in the ordinance, but I think we should think real carefully about how we position requiring or pushing year-round on people that wanna just improve their house. I handed out to you what the ordinance is, and I just picked out a couple areas that we might want to consider updating. And that is, in section B definitions, to upgrade and to get a seasonal conversion. It said in the current that you have to, replace or expand wastewater disposal system. I have found that some of these disposal systems are heinous. They're still, cedar planks or whatever, steel tanks that are gone and everything. But that points out to, that the code officer, is to offer an application to go over everything. It's actually the licensed plumbing inspector, and in the state permit for licensed plumbing inspector, the newest version here, they actually have seasonal conversions on the licensed plumbing thing. So I think for clarity, we might want to expand that part to, in section D, it says a seasonal conversion plumbing permit is required from the licensed plumbing inspector. And you can still leave the code enforcement officer on, because we're probably involved too. But that's where it has to be done. That's where the state notation comes from when we do it.
Can the code enforcement officer, if they're not a licensed plumbing inspector, do it?
You can do anything you want, but if you want to do it properly, you're supposed to have it.
I think the answer to that is no. You need to be a
Well,
licensed plumbing inspector.
We've had local town managers that have done it, but there's no either. And so you can, but it's not kosher, okay? And I think you want somebody that understands the plumbing things. If we could step back a little bit on definitions, I started saying, I just skipped over, replacing expanding wastewater disposal systems, not to include holding tanks. Holding tanks are being discouraged, phased out, not allowed. And within the state, you're not allowed to bring it up to code for seasonal conversion with a holding tank. They have to have a subsurface wastewater system.
Yeah, but isn't, well, as I read this whole piece, that part right there, just, it's describing what a seasonal conversion is. And it says that the act of creating a seasonal conversion might involve these kinds of things. I mean, it's just an including but not limited to list there.
Right, well, I think there should be a limitation, because this is one of those places where, it's actively being pushed away. I mean, the newest plumbing regulations have completely outlawed holding tanks as a first time use, or you cannot use a holding tank for the first time.
Well, that's been the case for a long time. The holding tanks have been out of code for a long time.
We've had 2 or 3 here in town that were built, even though it was out of code, and they had to go back and do an agreement to allow it to stay.
But if someone came in and said, I have a summer cottage and I want to do a seasonal conversion, and so I'm gonna put in a heating system, well, and I want a holding tank,
Right,
it's not gonna pass muster. I mean, they can't do it now.
they can't, but they do. And because a lot of them go to our ordinance, read it, think that they can go ahead and do it on their own.
Well, that makes sense.
It's happened 3 times. I was left with 3 leftovers when I started. And I stopped when half built. I just think it's one of these, we don't like to be redundant in our ordinance, but if it's important, I think we've done that with different things at different times.
So you put in the back, this in green.
Yeah, in green's where I put something in, yes. Make it pretty clear.
So what you had talked to me about isn't in here, right?
What's that?
You told me that you thought we needed a new definition of a seasonal dwelling and year-round dwelling.
Well, we don't have the definitions.
Yeah, and I don't think we need it.
Okay, that's fine.
So in the definition section, the screen stuff, you wanted to say, expanding the wastewater disposal system, which shall not include.
Holding tanks.
Or then you want to put licensed plumbing inspector down below.
Right, that's in green also. And again, my example is, this is the first time recently that, you know, in the state plumbing permits, they have put that actually on the permit in 2 places for the licensed plumbing inspector to fill out.
Yeah. Well, that makes sense to me. I thought that was always the case.
So holding tanks allowed to be,
Well, the state subsurface disposal rules have long said holding tanks are not allowed for new construction or, which is, that's not in there. I guess what I'm hearing is that our language doesn't quite correspond, or
It's open to interpretation, and a lot of people don't come for permits, but they do look at the ordinance to see what's allowed and what's not allowed. It's a lot akin to the pumping tanks upon changing owners. Okay, we did that a couple years ago. That's been in the state for a while, but we put it in because it wasn't being done. And it was just like, yes, it's redundant, but yes, it's important. I think it's, you know, helps out doing this.
No, I guess I don't have any particular objection to including it, but it completely eludes me. I mean, how someone could read this and say, oh, I have permission to put in a holding tank. It makes absolutely no sense. This language has nothing to do with that. You know, it's just talking about what a seasonal conversion is. But
Well, it's usually occurred where somebody has a property that's split by a road, and there's a large, you know, garage with a man cave or, you know, in-law apartment above, which was always used as that kind of thing. And then when they made them 2 different lots, a lot of people sell them separately and move in, and they put something like a holding tank in.
if they came to the town for plumbing permit, you would say you can't do it.
Can't do it, no way.
So how are we gonna stop them from? If they already know, if they read this, they know they have to put the plumbing inspector.
which is already the case.
Should be the case.
All right, so you think this language will help?
I think it's simple, it's 4 or 5 words.
All right. All right, anything else about this?
No, no, because we're seeing more and more of these, so.
And, you know, on your other point, I had this conversation with you back on the Fortini thing. I don't think it was a matter of the planning board pushing them to get a seasonal permit. I think that the issue was that what they were doing, in fact, you know, rendered that cottage habitable year round. And it qualified under the definition of seasonal conversion. And it didn't seem to me that it was appropriate for us to put our blinders on and you know, just let them do that without approving it, because that was the net result. That what they were doing was rendering that structure habitable as a year-round dwelling.
No, I'm not blaming anybody, and I'm not alluding to anything, but what I'm telling you is, no, they had no intentions of making it year-round. They wanted to put in the basement for their watercraft and things, but it was said, you know, be an advantage to, you know, have it as year-round if you want it. So again, all I'm saying is it's nothing that we should encourage or maybe.
What's the advantage to them of it being designated year-round?
Resale value goes up quite a bit. Yeah. And that's one of the roads where people live year-round.
Okay.
Good luck.
Okay, anything more about that one? Sure.
No,
Okay. All right. So those 2 green changes are what we're going to do.
Correct.
Comprehensive plan. You wanna talk about that for a minute,
Yeah,
Dana?
so I went through there's a document up on the town website next to the comprehensive plan that had a tab for planning board, and there were 85 items where they were designated for the planning board to work on. And I don't even think that they ever asked us, I mean, they were expecting us to work on these things, I didn't see any stringent requirements, deadlines, or anything like that, so I went through all 85 items and I put a response for every single one of them. Most of them were already incorporated into our land use ordinance already, and I annotated that. There were some, I think probably 8 or 9 of them where I said that we would address them in next year's review of the land use ordinance, and then there were some that were being addressed in this year. Everything that we've just been doing here, especially around, updating the land use ordinance from some of the things that we missed the last time we did it, when we had to abide by the state law, there were a couple of points that we had to miss. I annotated those as well, so there's 85 lengthy responses to all of these. I don't think you guys want to go through all of them.
No.
But I think it's good for us to have this document and to review it, and I would say go on record with the town saying that we've reviewed these, and here's either what we're not gonna do about it, or what we are gonna do about it, and when we're gonna do something. Like, one of the things was, they wanted a commuter parking lot or something like that. I just said, no, we're probably not gonna address that.
Well,
They wanted a ride share parking lot.
yeah, and that, there's a lot of things in there that are, kind of aspirational.
Very.
And that wasn't the planning board responsibility specifically, but it was acknowledged that if that happened, the planning board would have a role, possibly in its location and so forth. So there were other, I don't remember what they were, but there were other entities that were tasked with that, select board and town manager or something. So that is one that, I wouldn't expect the planning board was gonna take on
Yeah,
by itself. We may be called upon at some point to look at something, if anyone ever gets around to, citing a
right.
commuter lot, which is rather unlikely given all the other priorities around here, but,
This looked kind of like a template, maybe a consultant would put together for a lot of these things that they do for people, and then.
well, there was a consultant involved, but most of those individual pieces came from boards and committees and individuals who participated on the comp plan committee. And so there were a lot of different interests, a lot of competing interests, and a lot of stuff made its way into the comp plan.
I would, just from recollection, it's been about a month and a half since I did all this, but 85% of the things that were stipulated from the planning board are already covered in our land use ordinance, and I just said, it's covered, here's where it's covered, here's what you need to know.
And there's a lot of stuff that there are timeframes associated with a lot of it, and so in one column, it might say something like ongoing.
Yeah, there's a lot of
Yeah.
midterm.
A lot of ongoing stuff,
Yeah.
things we already do, and the fact that it's in the comp plan was an acknowledgement that we should keep on doing it. It was that kind of thing.
And Paul, I mean, you're much more versed in the land use ordinance than I am, so I use this as an opportunity for me to kind of study. Yeah, so that's why I used it to help me familiarize myself more with the land use ordinance, so I went through and annotated everything I possibly could, so maybe if you could review, I don't want to bore you to tears with it, but.
Well, I went through what you did, because I was really interested. I didn't spend a lot of time on it.
Yeah.
And, I was thinking that, at some point, as a board, we should look at it, together and make some decisions about whether there are specific items that we want to pick up, especially the short-term ones. Those were things that were designated as things that should or could be looked at within a couple of years.
Okay.
And so those are the things that I had kind of identified the first time through, because they were those short-term things. And so maybe what we could do, if everyone is amenable, is to use your document as kind of our starting point and go back, and take a broader look at what you did and look at those short-term items and the midterms and have a conversation about it. And I think I asked you this question before. You didn't find anything in there that was screaming for attention in this package.
No, nothing that was, nothing where we would be out of compliance or have violated what they were expecting of us. from the-
Yeah.
from the-
Because there's the issue of timing right now.
I think the most urgent things were the ones that were covered by the changes to the law, like 2 years ago, that were already incorporated.
The housing
The
stuff.
housing stuff,
Yeah.
like from 2023, that was mostly dealt with in the
Right.
last revision.
Yeah.
But there's 23 short-term items in here
Of the 8 or 9 that you
of the
identified,
ADA, yeah.
are they all short term or are they long?
These are all short-term, the 23 are short-term.
But you said there were 8 or 9.
There were 88 total,
Oh, 88.
yeah.
So would that work for you, Dana, if we used your document kind of as a starting point for a broader discussion
Yeah,
about the comp plan?
should I like maybe chunk it up in little bite-sized pieces and we do one per meeting or something like that, or a couple per meeting? Yeah.
So everybody else weigh in. I'd be more inclined to look in bigger chunks,
Okay, yeah,
like short term,
yeah.
see what that looks like. Because we might want to set some priorities, for instance.
You want me to summarize the short-term ones and just send a letter off to everybody and say, these are the ones that require the attention, here's the recommendation? And,
Sure.
yeah,
I think that would be a good place to start if you want to do your short terms, and then we can, after we get this moved off our plate, we could schedule some time to talk as a group about the short term items.
there were short-term ones, and there's probably overlap between short-term ones and the ones that I recommended that we address in next year's UO review. So I'll kind of combine all those and kind of prioritize them. And then the rest is most of the stuff that we're doing.
Yeah. Okay. All right, great.
So what you did on this was the notes.
Yeah, the notes is right, I wrote all those notes.
Yeah, thank you for doing that, Dana, very much.
It was a good exercise.
Okay. So, number 3 on the agenda is follow-up discussion on what we did last time and anything additionally that we might have missed, if anyone has anything. I had a couple of things I wanted to mention. One of which was, interestingly, Don, I ran into Colin Clark at the supermarket.
It
just happened to come up. And I said, gee, Colin, haven't seen you for a while, we were just talking about you. And so we had a long conversation about a lot of things. But the thing that's relevant here is that I talked to him about the floor area and footprint thing a little bit, and told him that you had reported back to us about your conversation. And I made the argument to him that what I was thinking about in particular was this, having to evaluate it both ways in order to be in compliance. And I argued to him that I was looking at this as a situation where Readfield had chosen to be more stringent by using floor area. And it is a more stringent approach than footprint, and the state law specifically authorizes towns to be more stringent if they want to. And he agreed. And he said, this was in the supermarket, but he did agree, and said, yeah, he said, I agree with you, you're right, it is more stringent, yeah, you can do that, you don't have to make any changes. So. All I wanted to share.
All right.
Yeah, it would have been, you know, I don't really, it didn't strike me that he had really looked very carefully at our ordinance. I think you mentioned that too, that
Yeah.
he hadn't really
got
looked
that
at the
impression.
details. Yeah, and, so in any event, you know, I made some notes when I got home.
Good.
And-
All right. Well, it saves me having to repeat that conversation then.
It's working too, right? I mean, it would be pretty disruptive to go from one method to the other.
Well, it would create some awkward situations, I think, with some
It would, some
recent
inequities.
decisions.
Yeah. And it might appear like shenanigans too, right? Like, so, like, hey, why are you changing this now after
Right,
I got my permit 5 years ago? What would have happened if you would have had these standards in
Yeah.
place?
and, you know, the other thing I was thinking about was the fact that we had spent quite a lot of time, a couple of years ago, making a lot of modifications to that non-conforming structure piece. And it was all based on using the floor area. And there might not be anything about it that would have to be changed, but it just made me think that we really have to go back through that with a fine tooth comb and make sure it's not problematic, because we had just made those changes a couple of years ago, so.
What's not working about the way we're doing
Personally, I don't think there's anything that's not working. I mean, it's complicated, but so is the other method.
it? Yeah, I know, everything's wrong.
That's right. And Don, was there anything in particular that you thought was advantageous to moving in the other direction? You know, other than this.
Well, it was simply the comments that he had made about, and at the time, I was thinking, because he was talking about the difficulties in training sessions, but it was really more the
That
volume.
volume issue, which we
Yeah,
don't
and
use anyway.
Once we got past that, then it didn't seem like there was really
Yeah.
enough reason there, so I'm not a proponent of changing at this point.
So is the state standard the volume? Then you have the option to do the volume 30% volume, is that?
Well, they moved to just the footprint and height, so they did have volume then.
So they've eliminated that now?
Well, they're not recommending volume because of all the difficulties.
Yeah, it's still there though, they haven't made any
A lot of
change.
towns use it.
Yeah, because it was there from way back. But going forward, they're recommending just footprint.
And it was, you know, I'm sorry, to give a lesson here, it was 30% increase in volume. Is that for non-conforming structures as well? or-
Yeah.
It's all about non-conforming.
Okay, so that would be more advantageous for the homeowner if 30% volume is in place. But Readfield has chosen to go with more stringent standards.
Correct. Yeah, floor area is,
Part of the thought was that if somebody had a big house already, let's say it was 3,000 square feet, they could expand by 30%, they could add 900 square feet to it. Whereas somebody who has 1,000 square foot house, can only add 30 feet. So we tried to come up with floor area to be maximum, that so everyone would be the same treatment.
Well, I gotta excuse myself, water's gone out of my house, I gotta get back. What's going on? The water in the house.
Oh.
Good luck,
Good
Jim.
luck.
I'll see
Thank
you
you.
tomorrow.
so any other thoughts on that?
I mean, I think it's worked well.
I think it's worked, I think it. You know, the rest of the non-conforming structure piece is all built around floor area. And as you point out, it is more equitable when you think about it.
Yeah, it seemed like from the last meeting that the volume was the big issue. So yeah, I'd be in supportive of just keeping it the way it is.
So the other follow-up issue was your language, John, that you circulated.
Yeah, I tried to structure it better so that it made a little bit more sense.
You
There
want to
is,
summarize it for everybody?
yeah, it seemed like to me that well, the first thing I did was I had the original version had footprint, so I put floor area back in. But from the information that Don and I received from the correspondent there at DEP, it looked like that the main idea is that you have to look at relocation before you look at expansion. So I tried to kind of organize it that way um, under under the G paragraph expansions, um, paragraph or subparagraph 2, it talked about expansion of a structure, and so I just added into, well, what can you do if you want to try to relocate it? And a central idea was that that any relocation of a non-conforming accessory structure must meet setback requirements to the greatest and practical extent. That's sort of a core idea. And so I did paragraphs 1 and 2 and they're somewhat it's somewhat redundant, but I wanted to just spell it out that in the design for a relocation, you've got a situation in subparagraph 1 where if the accessory structure abuts or overlaps the non-conforming principal structure, then it can be added. But if in subparagraph 2, it's just the reverse of that. In other words, if it doesn't abut or overlap, then you can't add it to it. And that was what I took from what I'm sorry, what was the fellow's name again that you talked to at
Colin White.
Colin?
Clark, rather.
Yeah, and that was what I took from what he was trying to say in his emails to Don and I. In addition, I wanted to clarify in subparagraph B that if a non-conforming accessory structure can be relocated so that it meets all the setback requirements, then it cannot be added, as it also cannot be added to the principal structure. It's kind of a complex idea, but this is what I understood him to mean.
So this also applies to somebody who tears down an accessory structure, right? It's not only relocation.
Yes, the idea would be that, all right, so if you want to look at trying to add the floor area of an accessory structure to the principal structure, then you're doing a design to see if that can happen. And if in the design you can relocate it, and relocating it, at least I understood this to mean that you wouldn't actually move the structure, you would be rebuilding it. But I guess you could move it if it was abutting, or if it abutted the principal structure. But the idea would be that in the design, if you can show that it would, if it were relocated, if it were relocated and it abutted the principal structure, then you could add it in. Did I answer your question, Jack? So I guess the concept that I got from what Colin was saying was that well, the thing is, you would have to tear it down, because the only way to add it would be because it's not there anymore. So you're adding that square footage or floor area.
Yeah, I think that concept that he was talking about already applies conceptually to conversations that we have around relocations and so forth, that you know, for instance, the Fisk property on Torrey. One of the things that we had to do was determine that it met the setbacks to the greatest extent practicable. And that's an exercise that you have to go through first for anything. So if somebody wants to expand something, you have to go through that exercise about the maximum extent exercise before you can get to the piece where you're talking about expanding. So it's like it's a precursor. You've got to do that first, make that determination, and then you can move on to talk about things like expansion. In this case, the question that comes to my mind is this ever going to happen? Should we bother to put it in the ordinance?
Did it come up though, that they wanted to tear down accessory structure, take that floor area and add it to a primary structure?
I don't think that happened with Fisk. I think where the issue came up initially was, what was the guy's name down on Colony Road? Weaver, yeah.
I think it comes up, and it would be nice for us to be able to, I mean, they still need to know, because they were under the assumption that they could, but there were certain requirements that they didn't meet. And they didn't find out until they made the proposal to the planning board. So they spent money on an architect, they made certain assumptions.
What did they want to do?
They had a shed behind the house that they wanted to reallocate to the house itself. And they would have found out that they weren't allowed to do that. I think that we should produce a document that says, okay, you want to renovate your lakefront home, here's what you need to know. In Readfield, we use floor space, not, what's the word? You get the idea.
Yeah.
But here are the 10 things that you need to know. That would be so, rather than hunting and pecking through the land use ordinance and trying to read that Greek that it is, it's very difficult. I think it would be beneficial for the residents.
I think, I think some kind of a simplified thing, an FAQ or something would be helpful. I have my doubts that it could include every fine point that's in the ordinance, but it could get the big stuff out there.
True.
At least, get them on track.
Or, you're a non-compliant ordinance, you may have to move your house. That would be nice to know from.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of people are surprised by that. And it's the planning board's discretion as to whether or not you have to do that. And I remember that case specifically where we said, we have to see whether or not we're going to ask you to move it or not. And they said, well, we assumed we couldn't because we're so close to the road. And in this meeting, we said, well, we might be able to waive that under certain circumstances. And it's not entirely clear, unless you're familiar with the land services, you are, Paula, what those circumstances could be, what they might not. It presents a lot of surprises, and it's really expensive to have conversations with architects.
Yes.
And
No, I got it.
Well, in And what I took, in addition to what I tried to write here, what I took from the emails that we heard from Colin, or what we got from Colin, was that I don't know whether he even could give an example of any time that this would happen.
Yeah.
And you know, I think he did say something like, you know, he did not know when or how this could happen. I'll tell you, I have not tried to study the law or the rule on this to you know, second guess, you know, his interpretation of this. But from what he is saying, which you know, Don can tell me if I'm wrong, but what he was gathering or what he was saying in these emails, I just it's very unlikely to happen.
Do you think that it might be better for us to figure out a way to answer the direct question in the ordinance about if I tear down my shed, can I add that floor area to my main house? Because we already have a relocation section that has standards for relocation of non-conforming structures.
Mhm.
And it seems like the question we're trying to get to is this question of, can I add that floor area to another structure?
Well, the answer to that is almost certainly not. You know, according to what Colin is saying, and like I said, I have not tried to study the law on this, but from what he's saying, I mean, it's like it would only occur if as he put it, if a redesign of it and the movement of it, a relocation of it would abut the principal structure, then you could, rather than actually relocating it, you could add that.
Yeah,
And
theoretically relocate it, demonstrate greatest practical extent,
right,
and then add it to the square
right.
foot.
I can think of a property, like it's a camp, it's got a small bunkhouse, and it's got two giant garages. None of these buildings are conforming. And none of them meet the setback requirements. I can imagine if somebody ever purchased that property, you would probably want to consolidate those buildings. I mean, there's building sprawl all over the thing. So what would we do in that case where you got?
Well, that was kind of the case with the Fisk property.
Yeah.
They had all this stuff going on and they wanted to do some consolidation. It's a little bit different, obviously.
Yeah,
right?
and I would imagine if they consolidated it, the square footage of non-conforming structures would be radically reduced from where it is now. Somebody would be willing to do that. I
But
mean,
we're saying you can't use those outbuildings. You can't add that in. So they can't.
I think if they're non-conforming, we can, right? If they don't meet the setbacks. Or like all of them are non-conforming, so they're all within 100 feet of the lake.
So you got a shed or whatever close to the lake, they want to tear it down, they're saying you gotta move it back. Meet the maximum except practical. If they start running into a setback from the road or whatever, and it just happens that it falls in the same setback area as the house, that's the situation where theoretically you could tear it down and get credit for it to the house.
We still have to be under the 1,000 feet or 1,500 square feet, right? The floor area.
Yeah,
But in the case like Dana was saying, where none of the buildings conform now, then you can't combine them. Because they're already all known, because you're saying, knock them all down and build one
so
building.
you do get, you are allowed to expand your house. According to the,
Right,
thresholds in the
you wouldn't be able
ordinance.
to use the entire amount of footage that all four buildings.
Maybe not.
Yeah.
Likely not. But because there is a maximum, depending on the distance from the lake.
Oh, it caps the square footage.
Yeah.
Not to the existing structure. I mean, because, well, let's just say you've got 5,000 square feet of structure that's non-conforming. Now,
Burns down.
yeah. I don't know, I mean, it's a hypothetical, right? I mean, in that case, I could see a benefit to working with that homeowner to try to reduce the amount of square footage that's non-conforming, allowing them to increase the structure of the home, the square footage of the home, but reduce the overall square footage of all the structures that are non-conforming. And that's how I thought that the world worked.
Yeah, what I was getting to was that of the property,
Mhm.
it's not.
It's a no.
It's not.
So, I mean, the option that they have then is to leave,
It's to leave the radial shed.
yeah,
Yeah.
and the huge garages, that probably should have been built in front.
So I think there are, I mean, you know, again, it depends on the distance from the lake, and because there are some caps on how much you can have within a certain distance.
Yeah.
Yeah, so if you were already at the maximum, it doesn't matter. You can tear down the accessory building, you can't add the square footage to the primary residence, because you're already at the cap.
Um, Yeah, so what?
It's not like Rush. I was just thinking about, hey, what would I do?
I mean, you know, if it all burned down, there is a reconstruction piece or replacement piece in here, but
Yeah.
it says if you do it within a year, you can replace it, but you can't make it any bigger. Unless, you know, of course, you could meet the expansion requirements.
And are there extensions for that year, because you probably couldn't get a contractor in the next year?
Um,
You have to get insurance.
Yeah, you're right.
Yeah.
Likely, but that's a problem for.
The other part of the ordinance that really kind of drove me crazy was you could only spend up to 50% of the value. What was it? It's 50% of the value of the existing structure in new construction?
That's
No,
for
no.
CEO review as opposed to planning board.
So the CEO, he can waive
Yeah,
that?
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, what it says is that, so if you removed or it was destroyed by more than 50% of market value, there are circumstances around that. It says may be replaced within a year, et cetera.
No, I'm not talking, I'm just talking about a renovation.
And then any non-conforming structure which is damaged or destroyed by less than 50% of the market value may be reconstructed in place with a permit from the code enforcement officer. So that 50% is just the, you know, planning board versus CEO threshold for replacement.
So there's a cap on the amount that you can invest in renovating your property, is that?
No, that has nothing to do with
Okay,
that.
so there's no cap, you can spend $1 million on
Yeah.
a $50,000 property.
Yeah.
Just limited by the floor area
Oh, okay.
and the height.
So John, what do you think we should do with this? Is it worth including something? Should we try to make some kind of a statement about?
Yeah, I think if I'm correct in understanding what Colin was saying, I think it would be more confusing than anything to put something in the ordinance about this, because it's just so unlikely to occur.
Yeah. And it's unlikely that, well, it's quite unlikely that anybody's gonna understand what it's trying to say.
No, I mean, I can barely understand it, and I'm not even sure I can understand it. So that's the thing. I mean, I don't want to try to hide anything from anybody, and if they can possibly do it, it might be that Chip or somebody, if they're talking to folks, if he can familiarize himself with what apparently the state restrictions are, then he might be able to say, well, yeah, if you can design a movement of a relocation of the accessory structure such that it knocks up against the principal structure, then yeah, you can add it. But I mean, as Colin has said, he he did not cite any examples of that ever happening, and he said it would be very unlikely that that would ever happen. Because I mean, if you can meet all the setback requirements, then you can't do it. And also, if for some reason it doesn't abut the principal structure, you can't do it then either. But it's only when a redesign and a relocation where it would abut the principal structure, then that's the only time that you can do it.
Let me ask something, if your principal structure is already at the maximum floor area, let's say 1,500 square feet, it doesn't matter what, if you tear down an accessory building, the non-conforming accessory building, you don't get to add it to the,
No,
because you're already at the maximum.
right? No, you don't. Well, I assume that we do not want to, and I guess I did not glean anything from what Colin said relative to that question, but we've already got in our ordinance certain maximum floor area
Right.
from depending upon how far you are from the lake. So I put in this language that I worked up that, you know, as long as it meets the other requirements of the paragraph.
So if your house was 1,200 square feet and you wanted to add to it, you can tear down the accessory structure, but you can still add to the principal structure because you're not at the maximum already. So I don't see what the accessory structure has to do with anything.
Yeah, it probably doesn't do anything ultimately, because there is, you know, they're pretty tight, but there are provisions for expansions of non-conforming structures,
Right.
which, you know, if you can demonstrate maximum extent practical, you can probably do the expansion, but you can only do it up to the maximum. And, you know, for instance, less than 100 feet from normal high water, so between 75 and 100 feet. Total floor area is 1,500 square feet. So you couldn't do any kind of an expansion that would exceed that.
Right, so it doesn't matter about the accessory building.
Right.
Tear it down. If you're below the cap.
Yeah.
That you
Yeah.
have that amount to play with, and it doesn't matter about the accessory building.
Yeah, I think that's true.
You know, before we got this, before Don and I got this email from Colin, I was kind of kicking off from what Brandon was saying, you know, about maybe we could figure out a way to give them a percentage of the floor area of the accessory structure. But I did not realize that, you know, there was this limitation about whether or not a designed relocation, whether it would abut the principal structure. So, but that seems to be the limiting factor.
The factor is the square footage that you're allowed for any structure.
Yeah, yeah, if you think back on the ones that we've done recently, I'm pretty sure they've all been designed so they bump right up to that maximum that's in the ordinance.
Yeah, I think, you know, we could, I mean, I could even work on this language some more to try to make it even clearer if I'm not sure I can do it, but I think it would just really be confusing.
I think there's a general perception out there that you can reallocate space. You can consolidate structures into a single structure. I mean, I've heard many people talk about it.
There are
Like,
towns where they let you,
they used to let you do that?
you still can in some towns.
Yeah, so I think that there's a general perception out there that it's a possibility. And it's a surprise to people when they find out that they can't.
So that would be a subject of a plain English document.
I think so. Yeah. Oh, I mean, there's also the perception up there that you can expand your property up to 30% until you bump up against the refill ordinance and you find that you can't.
In those towns that use 30%, is it 30% of both the principal structure and accessory structure?
I don't know.
I just assume like when people are going into this process, they're uneducated about the process and unfamiliar with the land use ordinance, and it's a matter of discovery as you're going through, and you can't discover it all at one time. It seems like you find out a line at a time, and it's located in different pieces, and it's a process. And anything we could do to help facilitate and expedite that process, I think would be well received.
Yeah, we could do
Well,
that.
so why don't we move this issue to the parking lot? We can keep thinking about it. I'm not sure that we're gonna come up with any better solutions, but we could consider it. I mean, as we're moving through this and see if there are any brilliant ideas that would allow us to do something a little bit different with the ordinance, but doesn't feel like we're going to come up with any language for this package. We're kind of time limited at this point.
I don't, my personal opinion is this, it's not, that the ordinance is not the problem. It's the complexity of understanding the ordinance that's a challenge for people. And if we could assist with that, it would be free help. Because no matter what we do, or how we change it, it's always gonna be complicated.
Yeah.
For the person who's not well versed in it, and they're gonna go through discoveries.
And I think when we started this conversation, I think we were all keying off Brandon's comment, I mean, looking for a way to allow people to, remove an old structure and somehow benefit the larger structure that they were planning to build. But as it's turned out, for several different reasons, it looks like that may not be possible or practical to approach it that way. But I would suggest maybe we keep it in the back of our minds, and if something comes up, we could still make a change at some point if anyone comes up with any good ideas for it. Okay, thank you for that, John.
Sure.
No. Let's see. The one other issue I wanted to put on the table and suggest that maybe we want to do something to clarify the language is this whole matter of stormwater that came up when we were talking about the Minnesota subdivision last time. My initial reaction was that we should talk about it tonight, but in thinking about that a little bit, reflecting a bit, I think that it's not appropriate to do that, because I don't think we can talk about that issue without getting into a conversation about the Minnesota situation. And that is not appropriate without notice and the parties being here and so forth. So the substance of that conversation, I think we need to leave until after we've taken up the Minnesota situation and we come to some decision on that. But as you'll recall, there was the language that mainland views as kind of conflicting language in the performance standards. There are two, an A and a B under the stormwater performance standard. They were looking at those and believed that they fell under the provision rather than the A. And then there is also a provision in the site review criteria having to do with stormwater. So there are three different elements there. And I think that some clarity around that issue would be, I don't think it'll be difficult to do. But as a board, we need to talk about how we want to approach it. And I think that conversation appropriately comes after we deal with the Minnesota issue. So I just wanted to put that on the table.
Deal with it, like after the final approval.
I don't think necessarily, I mean, we really didn't talk about whether or not we were accepting of the approach that Mainland put forward or not. And, you know, I guess I was assuming that we would have that conversation next week when we talk about Minnesota again. So. And then, I don't know, did anyone else, any other substantive issues that we may have missed or that you think should go on this list? Any other changes that we should talk about to the ordinance?
So do we just, the next step would be to review the revisions to the document and then?
Yeah. The next piece is that Angelica has agreed to put the working draft together for us. And rather than just circulate that and let everybody mark it up, it made some sense to me that we came to general agreement first on what the language is going to look like. And I think we've done that for the most part at this point. And so I would suggest that, you know, to the extent that we've done that with the pieces that you've worked on, that you send those to Angelica and she can start putting that into a working draft that she'll share with everyone that's all together. There are still a few things that, like on the CID piece, for instance, that we're not finished with, that we need to come to some agreement on. And Jack and I are going to have a conversation with the town attorney about those few issues that came up last time. And those might require some change. You know, for instance, your piece, Brandon, on the manufactured housing, I think everybody was in agreement on that, and there were a few changes that were suggested, and so I think, you know, that's a piece that we're ready for Angelica to put into a draft. So we can start feeding those pieces to her when they're ready.
Yep.
And so when we have a complete draft, I think that everyone should review it individually, and then as a group, we can talk about it one more time in a meeting setting. So if, you know, if we see something that we missed or something that we've thought about some more, the manufactured housing piece, for instance, we could talk about that and come up with a final draft.
Is the deadline for that March 31st?
No, the deadline, the absolute deadline, and I don't want to go to the absolute deadline, but to get something to the select board is the 4th of April.
Okay.
So toward the end of March, I want to be able to have a final draft that we can forward to the select board. And so that necessitates, we need to come to agreement as a board on all the language and then vote to forward it to the select board. We also need to hold a hearing before that. And so to hold that hearing, we need to have what we think is our final draft that we've agreed to as a board. So what I was thinking was that potentially we have a meeting on the 11th of March, and it felt to me like that might be the right time frame for a hearing. If we can get all the draft language to Angelica, we have a regular meeting next week on the 11th. And then we also have a regular meeting on the 25th of February. don't remember what the hearing notice timeframe is, do you? I'm
I think it's
thinking
10 days.
Is it
I
10?
believe it's 10 days, yeah.
Okay. So if we, what's that? Yeah. So, let's see, oh, no, it's, 13.
Ooh.
Yeah. The date of the first publication, it's 2 publications. Date of the first publication is at least 12 days prior to hearing.
That's right.
Second is 7 days prior to hearing. Yeah, the 10, I think, is for the regular application.
It is, yeah.
This is, yeah, this is.
Where is it posted?
The public hearing,
Yeah.
it gets posted at both post offices and the town office, and then of course in the paper.
Which paper?
I think he does the Kennebec Journal typically now,
Yeah. Yeah.
because the other one went out of circulation, so.
It's in the legal notices in the KJ or something? You know, I looked at the KJ recently and you could look at all legal notices and I tried to find the town of Readfield.
Oh, really?
I couldn't find them.
I think it's a public meeting. though.
I wonder if it's in the right place.
Uh,
I'll look into
I
it.
think it's, something was different there, was saying a while back.
Okay. Yeah,
I don't know
I'll look
why.
into it and find out.
I think it's the only thing left in the KJ now, is public hearings.
Yeah, not the obituaries.
So when when we get, we need a date to get everything to Angelica. She needs time to send it back, and when she sends it back, what, like if I saw something that I didn't think was right or questioned, how would I, what, would I
Well,
write that?
I was suggesting, I think the most efficient way for us to do that is to come together as a group and produce a final draft in a meeting setting, rather than, you
Yeah,
know,
because-
starting to sling emails around.
Yeah,
I
and it,
just-
essentially I'll just create a working draft, so if you have stuff you still want to change on it, I would assume that it's still changeable until it's voted on, you know, so.
Could we do it that Tuesday between the 11th and the 25th?
We could, if people are willing to do another off meeting in between, that would certainly work.
Would you be able to have it ready by then?
Is that the 18th, Brandon? Is that?
Let's
Yeah, it's
see.
the 18th.
I would think so. Actually, I was gonna ask too if everybody can get me their pieces as soon as possible, because I do have some Thursday personal things coming up that will take me out of the office, and this is kind of stuff I work on Thursdays, so I don't get interrupted. Then you take the kids to the orthodontist.
No.
So as soon as possible would be best, but I think we could do that. I mean, I do have to check, of course, just triple double check downstairs, make sure we don't have anything for the 18th. I don't believe we do. So I think we'd be all clear for that.
Okay.
I'm not available for the 11th or the 18th, I'm traveling both weeks, but you don't need me. But if you're short on people.
Yeah, okay.
So
I'll do that
if,
too.
when you get the draft, if there's anything, you know, that you want to propose changing, why don't we just do that in the draft and
Okay.
send it to Angelica and to me,
Okay,
and then we can talk about it.
okay.
Okay, so, drafts as soon as possible. Some are finished, some aren't quite finished, but as soon as possible. Get those to Angelica. We'll target the 18th for another workshop meeting to produce the final draft. And then there'll be plenty of time to post for a hearing tentatively at our regular meeting on the 11th of March.
So in terms of the solar thing, I know we're working on it. I think the only thing on it was, came up was a chip on
Yeah.
it. Peter's language from the CRD. I'm not sure what it was supposed to do with that.
He had, I know he consulted with Eric and, he had emailed us about that. Eric was okay with the date change, but he wanted some additional language included about the proximity to the regular town meeting and,
Yeah.
and so forth.
Draft language.
Yeah, yeah,
It's only for the CID process.
yeah. And except Peter can't do that. So he have, well, he has said that he can't do revision marks. He can't edit documents. I can edit his document.
Yeah.
I can do that.
I'll get yours, Brandon, don't worry about it.
Yeah. We'll need to with the same tool.
One way or another, we'll figure it out.
Did I send, did you get the document that I sent to Brandon? Because I thought I did most of them in Word.
Which one, the complaint thing?
Yeah.
No, the manufactured housing one.
No,
Oh.
I'm talking about the ones where Brandon worked on it. for
I
me.
should have it in.
I thought I sent it to you and Brandon too. so-
You probably
Yeah.
did, yeah.
What did you?
I
just
know.
did it, I did it, yeah.
Dana did a much better job.
I should have it in here, I've got everything printed that
If you
has
don't, I
been
still have
sent
a
to
copy
me.
of it, I can send it to you.
Yeah, if you wanna send it to me, just to be on the safe side, that's,
I'll do it tomorrow. I have it
yeah,
on
no
the computer, I'll send
problem,
it to you.
yeah, do it tomorrow. I won't even, I won't be in probably till after 10 tomorrow.
Actually.
But I'll find out pretty quickly about our next workshop, and get that out to everybody so everybody knows and go from there.
Oh, that's all I've got. Anything else, anybody?
So the meeting on the 18th is on.
Yeah,
I'll confirm tomorrow.
Confirming, but
Yeah.
5:30.
Oh, good point.
well,
How much do we,
no, that's not the hearing. Everybody good with 5:30 for that last
so-
workshop meeting?
yeah,
Okay.
5:30 when?
The 18th,
Okay.
that's, that's another off Tuesday, and that's the time when we'll look at the drafts and mark it up, finalize it.
wonder if I can have Eric show me how to do the screen share thing, because we could look at it right up there, I
Uh-huh.
bet, that'd
Yeah.
be cool.
The fourth is the public hearing.
No, the 11th is a regular meeting,
March.
the 11th of March. Right. Yeah, and that, that will give us, that'll give us plenty of time to get the notices, the notice out. Okay. Thank you all. We're adjourned.
I found that document, John, can I just send it to you?